So, you want to save the world with clean energy? Make money doing it? Confused about the economic and technical realities of residential and commercial solar, batteries, heat pumps, EVs? Want the real-world scoop on new energy technologies, not manufacturer hype? Then tune in to the Weekly Energy Show, hosted by Barry Cinnamon. Insights from Barry's 40-plus years in the solar and energy industry will help you understand the future ways we'll generate and consume energy. And now, here's Barry.
Welcome to this week's Energy Show. Now, I've been an energy geek ever since college. Now, back then, we had an artificial energy crisis caused by OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, and they didn't want to ship oil and gas to the U.S., so gas prices went through the roof. We're having a similar energy crisis right now here in California, but it's for electricity, not oil and gas. We have plenty of cheap electricity, mostly generated by solar, but not enough electricity where we need it. In homes, in businesses, driving our vehicles, even data centers. As a result, California's electricity prices are going through the roof because supplies of cheap solar power are controlled by utilities, and it's not really getting to where we need it. And basic economics, lower supplies, higher costs, and higher costs of living. So as within the 70s, we're having this electricity crisis is not being caused by really a shortage, but by bad policies. Politicians are passing laws that expand the utility monopoly control over electricity. They're preventing homes, businesses, schools, apartments, cities from doing what they want to generate their own power, specifically limiting rooftop solar and batteries. And what makes matters worse is there's laws out there that allow the utilities, like PG&E, to lobby politicians to extend their monopoly over the power we need. Basically, this lobbying is using our money to lobby our politicians to increase their profits. But at the end of the day, energy costs, it's really a political issue. We have the technology, but we don't have the political will. And so to that end, it's my pleasure to have Sam Liccardo join us on today's Energy Show. Sam's a former two-term mayor of San Jose, and he's now running for U.S. Congress. And if you're wondering what Sam wants to do if he's elected to Congress, the answer is right on his webpage. He wants to reduce the high cost of living, homelessness. He wants to get smarter on safety and lowering utility bills by using affordable renewable energy. So welcome to the show, Sam.
It's great to be with you, Barry. You know, I turned down Oprah to be on this show because I have not yet been on the Barry Cinnamon Show, and this is an opportunity I didn't want to miss.
Well, you're wearing purple, and that's what she was wearing on her DNC speech. So
yeah, sure, all good. The kids are doing it now. Yeah,
and she likes that color.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's just dive into the big topic. Why are you running for U.S. Congress? I mean, that's a maelstrom. That's an alligator den. What are you going to do there?
That's the same question my wife asked me, though she asked it in a slightly different way, which is something along the lines of, Sam, what the hell's wrong with you? but somehow she relented and let me run anyway. It is a mess out there, but I think we recognize, and I think in the last few weeks, people have become more energized about the opportunity to make positive change. And this is a moment we critically need to have folks who are willing to roll up their sleeves, work across the aisle, and help us tackle the big challenges we're facing in this country right now. Among them, of course, climate change, something you've been working on for several decades. We critically need to see much more traction in Congress on critical initiatives. But I also think about a host of other challenges we have, like a housing crisis, like the growing gap in income and income inequality that we're facing in our country and certainly here in this valley. So there's a lot to be done, and I'm looking forward to rolling up my sleeves.
All right. Well, our sleeves are rolled up. It's another really hot day here in Silicon Valley. But just kind of my observation, everybody knows, politics is very fragmented, very contentious. How will your experiences as San Jose mayor help with navigating this political environment in Washington, D.C.?
When you're the mayor of a large city, you have to get used to sitting down with a lot of people who don't like you. I hope you like me, Barry, but a lot of people who
there's a lot of people, 2 terms, there's a lot of people that ended up liking you, but still it's challenging.
Yeah, there always are. And, you have to balance budgets, which means you make people upset when you have to make cuts. You have to make a lot of hard decisions. But you sit down with folks who don't like you because you understand that's critical for the city. You have to come to agreement with people who might disagree, and you have to find ways to reach across a lot of divisions. And you don't have the luxury as mayor of simply pointing the finger at somebody else and saying that blankety blank other party is the reason why we didn't get anything done. People hold you accountable for getting things done. You show up at the grocery store or the gym, everybody tells you what's going on in their neighborhood, and the burglary and the pothole and the homeless encampment, whatever it might be, and they expect you to be responsive. And I think that sense of responsibility and accountability is what we critically need in Congress right now. And that enables folks to have the will to reach across the aisle rather than what has been the pattern over the last several years, which is just point the finger at the other party, say it's their fault, and scream a little louder in your next press release. Obviously, that's not getting anything done. We've seen this is the least productive Congress in more than half a century, according to Axios magazine. And that's actually saying quite a bit because it's a pretty low bar. But in order to get things done, we're going to have to reach across the aisle and work with people who don't agree with us. That's essential to democracy.
All right, that makes sense. And what I like is that you walk the talk when it comes to energy and the environment. I noticed that you drive a Chevy Volt. You had a rooftop system put in by SunPower. You've got a heat pump right now. So as a homeowner, how have your clean energy decisions worked out for you economically?
Oh, fantastic. I mean, I'm a proud owner of a heat pump that was recently installed by a great company here in the Valley, known as Cinnamon. And it is reducing our energy usage and our bills. And for the first time in my lifetime, I have air conditioning in my house in California. That's a wonderful thing. And let's face it, it's going to keep getting warmer, so we're going to need it. So my wife is thrilled. These decisions we make, obviously, they're for the long haul. They cost a lot of money up front. They always do. Well, unless you have a power purchase agreement or some other financing arrangement. But the important thing is that we know in the long run, it's always better. It's worth taking the risk and obviously the upfront financial cost to make these decisions because in every one of these cases, whether it's the solar panels or the heat pump or the car, I've always felt much better after having it. And I know it's better for my wallet, but it's certainly better for the planet.
Yeah, and you kind of look back and say, gee, when I put that old SunPower system in, look at how much money you've saved over the years, did double or triple. I mean, more than was expected. Same thing with the Volt, probably the same thing with the heat pump is at the rate electricity's going up. It's just makes so much sense. And then the Volt, I had a Volt. We still have a Volt. It's wrapped. The guys use it for driving. It's a great car.
Yeah. Yeah, too bad they discontinued it.
Well, those decisions don't always make sense to me either. So let's kind of drill down into Silicon Valley. It's a great place to live and work, but it's a really high cost of living. Electricity costs have increased 63% over the past 3 years, according to the Mercury News. And the average homeowner is going to pay, and kind of look at the math, but going forward, they're going to be paying $10,000 a year for energy. Gas, electricity, natural gas if they're using it. So what are some of the things you've done as mayor of San Jose to rein in these costs?
Well, we launched a community choice energy program in San Jose back in 2018, and San Jose became the largest city in the country to do so. And community choice energy essentially enables local communities to supplant the investor-owned utility as a wholesale provider of electricity. Now, that still means that PG&E provides the wires and the poles and all the distribution infrastructure, but San Jose Clean Energy is now purchasing power for 1 million San Jose residents and thousands of businesses, and we're able to do it now that we're 6 years into it, be able to do so at about 8% less than the PG&E rates, which is saving many of our residents money. And it's particularly good savings for very low-income residents. We have a low-income discount that's 20% lower. That's certainly a benefit to many residents. And of course, it helps the planet. We launched this with the idea that we would be focusing on renewables and energy storage. And very large transactions now have taken place that enable us to broaden our access to both storage as well as wind and solar and other non-fossil fuel sources. And 95% of the electricity now is GHG free. And we're going to get to 100%. And that's a tremendous bit of progress that we're seeing in communities throughout the Bay Area have chosen CCAs or community choice energy programs. And we certainly want to see more communities do that throughout the state.
I've done solar installations all over the country and all over California in big cities and small cities, LA, San Diego, and even on the East Coast. San Jose has the best solar and battery permitting system out of any city, large or small, that I've ever come across. So the permitting reforms that you did in San Jose, now it's super fast. We love working in San Jose.
Thank you for saying that, Barry. That's music to a former mayor's ears. I can tell you no mayor ever hears that the permitting system is working in their city hall. So this is a first for me. This is a great thing.
I'll tell it to Matt too. It was what your team did is they basically said all the permits are going to be over the counter. I remember like 2014, 15, we would have to wait for hours just to get the permit. And basically San Jose said, here's the guidelines. As long as the permit falls into these guidelines, do it electronically. And our inspectors will then inspect to make sure you did it the right way. But that means that we can bang out those systems really fast. And it's a really big improvement. I wish other cities, big and small, would take that approach.
Well, I appreciate that, Barry. And thank you. We're fortunate to have a very good team, a hardworking team at City Hall. They're understaffed, but they're hardworking. And I'm proud of the permitting reforms we put in place, not just with solar, but a lot of other things. For example, accessory dwelling units, which has really helped to provide some relief to this housing crisis that we're facing. And we managed to watch with 1 day permitting on ADUs, we were able to rapidly expand uptake. For now, we went from about 15 permits a year to about 800 permits a year. So it really does make a difference if you're able to get the red tape out of the way.
Yeah, no, there's no red tape for the ADUs. My wife and I looked into putting an ADU in, and we were going to do it, but then we realized the only place we could put the ADU where she has her garden. So, so much for that.
There's a higher authority. I understand.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Okay, let's talk a little bit about utilities. Most utilities like PG&E, they're regulated monopolies. So they're supposed to provide affordable, reliable, and safe power. How are the utility regulations in California failing here, not meeting those affordability, reliability, and safety goals?
Well, I think if you ask most residents in this region, they would say they're pretty dissatisfied about reliability, about the cost of electricity, about a whole host of challenges. I'm running for Congress, which means I won't have any direct role in state regulation, which overwhelmingly the regulation really happens at the state level through the Public Utilities Commission. But I've certainly had my challenges as a mayor battling rate increases in what they call PCIA charges, which are something that every resident in my city is paying for, a host of other challenges with the PUC. And there's fundamentally a problematic relationship, in my view, between the PUC and investor-owned utilities in each of the regions where they are dominant. I think is certainly problematic. I'd like to see more mechanisms to increase competition, certainly at the state level. And I think to some extent, community choice energy programs have provided some of that competition, but much more needs to be done. So while I won't be directly involved in that at the federal level, I'd certainly encourage innovation. I think what we're seeing right now is a strategy, for example, as we think about PG&E, which is heavily dependent on very large capital investments, which are going to continue to drive rates upward and very sharply. And it's not self-evident to me and many others that those capital investments are the very best, that we need to ensure we have reliable electricity, a strong dependence on the grid as opposed to simply perhaps supporting more distributed generation and storage, which can provide some relief to a grid that is clearly overburdened in peak periods or maybe overburdened at different times. And an investment strategy that says they're going to essentially pour tens of billions of dollars into undergrounding when there are alternatives, safe alternatives that do not require that kind of investment and frankly could be deployed much faster to make the system safer. So I'm concerned that the incentives are in place that over-incentivize a lot of capital expenditure really at ratepayers' cost.
So what starts in California has a tendency to spread east. And California's issues with inexpensive electricity were failing on that dimension. But I see the same mistakes being replicated at many other utilities and PUCs around the country.
Yeah.
Is that something that you could have an influence on in Congress if you're elected?
That's a good question. I'm going to punt on that question because I'd like to do a deeper dive. I've spent most of my time dealing with the challenges in local and state regulation, and I haven't had the opportunity to really explore. I know FERC certainly has a role here, obviously, and I think there's a lot that Congress can do to make it less costly to harden the grid, expand capacity on the grid. For example, there's a bill now that's pending in Congress, hasn't, to my knowledge, made it out of committee yet, but it's called the Big Wires Act that would enable easier permitting for transmission lines, which is going to be really critical as we continue to see rapid expansion in power demand for everything from AI to cryptocurrency to everything else we're using, data centers and so forth, we're going to need much more reliable transmission and greater capacity transmission to avoid some of the challenges with peak power uses in different parts of the country. The current system basically has everyone who wants to build a transmission line having to get a permit everywhere along the line from all the local jurisdictions, or not local, but actually regional jurisdictions. Having a single permit would do a world of wonder to reduce the time it takes to get through the permitting system, reduce the cost, and hopefully reduce the capital cost to PG&E and everybody else who might be downstream. So there's certainly more that Congress can do. But I want to hesitate before I jump into the whole question of regulation, because I'll probably get in over my skis.
Well, that kind of answer just adds more respect to you as a politician, because very often politicians just throw out solutions that they're not that familiar with.
Oh.
And if somebody says to me, well, I'm not really sure, I'm going to have to do some more research, my respect goes up.
Well, thank you.
It's not the answer, but it's a good answer.
Thank you.
All right. Well, when we're talking about that, who's making the energy decisions here in California for rate increases and capital investments, and how is that process not working, and how is it broken?
Well, again, I'm not the expert in state regulation, but certainly I've spent enough time around this issue in front of the PUC in different ways. Fundamentally, the Public Utilities Commission is full of individuals on the board who are appointed by the governor. They have state law that they need to follow. Of course, the legislature sets the basic rules and parameters, and the PUC's job is to adjudicate rate cases. Those are the requests that come up every several years from the investor-owned utilities to increase rates to be able to pay for the various programs they have to provide reliable and safe power. And on top of those rate cases, and what the public really doesn't see is the many adjustments to rates that are made throughout that period, sometimes as many as 2, 3, 4 times a year. We can see rates go up because state law allows, for example, for utilities to seek additional compensation to pay for specified capital costs, for example, maybe to deal with wildfire risk or other issues. And so we never really have a transparent vetting of the costs and the means in which the utilities are going to address the critical needs in the community. What we tend to have is a very obscure process. A rate case itself, while it is a public process, there are public participants. And yes, someone, if they have the persistence, can try to get through the multi-hundreds of pages of every rate case submission. The reality is the action isn't just in those rate cases, it's in all the other processes that are happening before the PUC that also have a very serious impact on rates and ultimately on the provision of electricity and, of course, of gas as well. And so the problem is this is a very obscure process to ratepayers. Ratepayers don't understand how to get involved. There's maybe a couple organizations that speak for ratepayers and do their best. But for the most part, the political force is overwhelmingly on the side of investor-owned utilities. There's a lot of political contributions that are made, whether by them or by their allies. In this case, for example, I'm running for Congress against an opponent who has benefited just in the primary of this election from $325,000 in contributions from PG&E through a super PAC. Now that contribution may go up. I don't know what's going to happen with that in the runoff here before November, but it cannot help but affect how legislators view their role when they get into the seat, when they know that the investor-owned utility has just contributed 6 figures into a super PAC. I have to go find 330 friends who can all contribute $1,000 to be able to match that, what PG&E signed in with a single stroke of a pen.
Yeah, that's money in politics, and I understand that there's money in politics, but what's particularly galling is when the money is our money.
Yes.
We pay our bills, it goes to the utility then spends money to lobby those politicians so that they can maintain their monopoly. But okay, let's talk about something that's really practical and I think a lot easier to solve. The energy industry is going to continue to grow very, very fast. Distributed energy, solar, wind, other technologies. And those all are, by definition, they're local jobs. This is construction that has to happen in your city or in our state. How can organized labor help with reducing these high energy costs?
Well, We are desperately short of skilled labor right now, particularly in electrical and other, I guess you might call more expensive trades, the higher wage trades. And there's no question that the extent that organized labor can broaden the pipeline, particularly for young women and men who are in high school who may decide college isn't for them, but they still want to have a path to a middle income career and be able to afford to live in this very expensive place. Careers in the trades are great opportunities. So we need to do more. And whether that's the trades themselves or probably more likely in partnership with lots of organizations like community colleges that can help really broaden the pipeline, I think that's going to be critical for us. And it's true not just for our energy future, it's true for our housing future, for example. And we are in the Bay Area, of course, paying extraordinarily high rents and costs, in part because of the construction costs. It costs typically $900,000 to $950,000 for a single apartment to be constructed in an apartment building in the Bay Area. It's those kinds of cost factors that are really punishing families right now. And one of the many solutions we need to deploy is we need to have more skilled labor.
Yeah, it's funny. I think back when I was in high school and I took metal shop and I took an electronics course. I learned electrical stuff, and there was all kinds of more trade-oriented courses. And I don't even think they're teaching that in high school anymore.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's true that a lot of high schools have dropped that, and I know there's some resource constraints involved there, so I don't want to point fingers, but there's no question we critically need those pathways. We need those pathways for a lot of young people who could flourish on those paths. And frankly, as a society, we need people in those jobs. We've got a lot to build, and certainly as we think about our energy future, whether that's with regard to the grid, if you give you a quick example. You ask anybody who is building anything these days, whether it's an affordable housing project or a warehouse or an office building, although not many offices are being built right now, they'll all tell you about the many month-long delays in just getting a hookup from PG&E. Everybody's short on staff.
Yeah. We have that issue too because we're upgrading services and it just sometimes takes literally forever. Okay, let's change gears a little bit and let's talk about Sam the Citizen. Like many Silicon Valley residents, you're an avid bicycle rider. How has bike riding evolved and changed here in Silicon Valley?
I am an avid cyclist, although recently my bike got stolen from my garage. So, I left office and suddenly there's a spike in crime. I know, bike thefts from garages. But nonetheless, no, I loved cycling and will do it again as soon as I get a couple more wheels. My wife, however, is not quite as avid as I am, particularly after I got hit by an SUV and broke a couple vertebrae in that collision. So she got me a Peloton after that with a goal of keeping me in the garage for as long as possible.
Well, I noticed that the bike lanes are much better in Silicon Valley. I drive home during lunch and I ride my bicycle back every day and going up Blossom Hill and stay in the bike lane.
Every one of those bike lanes represents a bruising battle. Let me just say, I could tell you as mayor, I've been in a lot of rooms with very upset neighbors about the loss of their parking and what might happen to traffic congestion and everything else. And what we found is actually, we really doubled down on this idea of creating both more bike lanes, but also more segregated lanes, separated lanes for cyclists to feel safer. And we did it partly for the cyclists, of course, but really more than anything for the pedestrians. What we found in a lot of these neighborhoods, you look at like 10th and 11th Street in downtown, for example, in San Jose, these were really freeways that were built in the 40s and 50s and 60s in our cities, 3-lane roads, everybody's driving 45 miles an hour, and you've got residents, living right on those streets with kids playing in the front yard. And removing a lane and putting in a separated or segregated lane was really critical for pedestrians. People are crossing the street again. It's a wonderful thing. People are out walking again. And that's really why we did it, to slow the traffic a little bit, provide more safety for everybody, including folks in the cars. And I think the proof is in the pudding. We're seeing fewer traffic wrecks as a result.
Yeah, well, I like your comment. It was a bruising battle to get those bike lanes put in place, but I can definitely guarantee that it's reducing a lot of cyclist bruising and damage and injuries.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, my wife thanks you for that also, but she's still worried about me, riding. But I got to do it. I got to do it for exercise.
Yeah, we live in a beautiful place. We should take advantage of it.
Yeah. So let's talk about things from a federal level. What do you think you can accomplish and change in Washington, D.C.?
Well, as we think about our energy crisis and the climate crisis, whatever we get accomplished is going to require us to reach across the aisle, right? We're going to have a divided Congress. We know that's true now, and it's probably going to be true after November. I expect Republicans will take the Senate, the Democrats will take the House based on how the numbers are aligned right now. And that's going to require us to try to persuade some Republicans to support a climate-friendly agenda. Obviously, climate is a word that some of us use and others don't, so we're going to have to reframe what we're doing, and we're going to have to talk about utility bills, for example, because it turns out that people in Florida hate paying high utility bills just like people in California do. So what I've proposed in a book that I've got on my website, and everyone can read it online, and it will put you right to sleep, I'm sure, but it is free, so you get what you pay for. One of the ideas I float, among others, is the idea of how we could expand federal financing to help homeowners and business owners, apartment owners invest in all of the things we know we need to be investing in our buildings, whether it's solar panels or heat pumps or batteries in the garage, all those things that are going to make us more sustainable and will reduce our utility bills. And the focus is using existing tools we already have. Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac already provide federally backed financing for tens of millions of homeowners to get into their first home. They also have a green bonds program for some of these types of improvements, but they're very limited to refinancing, so not many people can qualify for them. And I think we can broaden that program quite a bit and take advantage of existing programs or a model of a program that exists in several counties in this country called Property Assessed Clean Energy that enables property owners to put the debt on the property so they can pay it off over time. If they think they're going to move in 2 or 3 years, they won't feel bound by the debt. They can sell the home in 2 or 3 years, pass the debt and the improvement on to the buyer, and hopefully with a federalized program have a much easier time with dealing with all the lenders, ensuring that we can actually make it work. Turns out that what we know from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, homeowners are a pretty good investment. They're pretty low risk. They tend to pay their bills. And this is a great way to help a lot of homeowners reduce their utility bills at the same time that we transition to a cleaner energy future.
Yeah, PACE makes a lot of sense. That was started up by Cisco DeVries maybe 15 years ago here, and it got some good traction, and working on a national basis would be terrific. That would be a godsend, because it's not just solar, it's not just batteries, it's heat pumps, it's other energy efficiency things. And you got to make the programs very simple. Otherwise, they get overburdened with regulations, and then the take-up is just not sufficient.
Yeah, and we also have to make it at a cost people can afford. So we've got a lot of modest income homeowners and business owners that just cannot go and finance this on their own. And certainly the IRA was a great piece of legislation that's helping a lot of folks. But, a $2,000 tax credit isn't necessarily going to bring it home for somebody who's looking at a $40,000 bill. We've got to enable folks to finance it and put it on their property over time.
Yeah, it makes total sense. All right. Well, how can people get in touch with you? How can they support your campaign for Congress?
Oh, thanks, Barry. It's music to my ears. We love to have anybody get involved in volunteering. We got a great team. We'd also love folks to participate in other ways. We're putting up lawn signs. We're hosting house parties. We got dozens of those throughout the district. Just send us an email to sam@samliccardo.com. That's Sam @samliccardo. Last name is spelled Liccardo.
All right, terrific. Well, that's all the time we have on this week's Energy Show. Thanks, Sam, for joining me on this week's show.
It's been a pleasure, Barry. Thank you.
And thanks to all of our listeners for tuning in. If you missed any of today's show, you can always go to our website at energyshow.biz and listen to the podcast.